Like if someone tells me to F off on the phone, I'll be like, okay. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Welcome to this week's episode of Madvocate Mondays. Today I want to talk about a question that I've been asked on and off for a few years now. I hope that this will give information that is useful to anyone looking to enter a career of their choice. You know, obviously my career experience and my working experience has been in Australia, so I'll talk about that. In my last video, I talked about issues that I faced as an African person, as a black person trying to enter the workforce in Australia. So go have a look at that if you haven't already. All right, so my career journey in Australia, it definitely has not been linear. It's been a series of trials and errors. I've done jobs that I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be doing. Like I talked about my first job in a previous video. I'll link that at the end of this video. So I'll give a bit of a history about my career journey. So I studied law and media in Australia. I initially envisioned myself working in the media space because that's where my passions lie, but you know, for reasons I've discussed in other videos, that didn't end up happening, and so I then ended up working in law. So I mean, if you're looking to enter into any career in Australia as an African person, you will face challenges because of preconceived biases about your abilities, about who you are, where you're from, that sort of thing. So I would say the first thing is be comfortable with the unknown and get comfortable real quick, because that's probably a space you've occupied or you're going to occupy. You're gonna get several no's before you finally get a yes. In my particular instance, I was looking for legal jobs for years and years before I finally got my first full-time job. Now, the way that I even got the interview for my first job was to try and set myself apart from every other application. I was responding to job ads online. You have to think thousands of people are looking at the same job ad. Thousands of people are applying for the same job. You can't just rely on a stock standard resume to be the thing that gets you the job. Because like I said in my previous video, as an African in Australia, you're constantly having to prove yourself. You're constantly having to prove you know English, you're intelligent enough, you can do the job, because you just don't have the connections that your Anglo counterparts have. So I remember during this time, I was living in South Australia in Adelaide, and I had applied for numerous jobs. I had just been fired from a telemarketing job because I wasn't good at sales. And I'm not the type of person who, like, if someone tells me to F off on the phone, I'll be like, okay. Like I won't be like, no, but sir. So I got fired from my telemarketing job, which they were sham contracting me, by the way, but I didn't know that at the time. I was starting to get extremely frustrated that I wasn't getting a job in my field of study. So I remember at the same time, a friend of mine was also looking for a job in his field of study, and I'd find that he'd printed out his resumes and was putting them in envelopes, and I'd be like, what are you doing that for? He'd be like, oh, because I'm also sending, like, I think he would go door knocking and send his resumes in the post as well. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try this shit. So I went, my first full-time job, I sent the online application, which is usually all that's required in Australia, sent the online application, but I also sent an application in the post, in express post. This is what my situation was at the time. I had just finished uni, so I no longer had access to the student lounge or printing privileges or that sort of thing. So I would ask my sister, who was working at the time in the city, to print, you know, 10, 15 copies of my resume. I would drive to her workplace, pick them up, and that's how I had physical resumes to hand out. So I'd print my resume, I put it in an envelope, and I put it in express post and posted it to that workplace. And so I thought, okay, can't hurt. Like, I've already sent in my application online. Can't hurt to have another application in the mail, because that saves whoever it is that prints those applications from printing them. That's what I thought. And I was like, oh, I think this is a good idea. Now, shout out to my blood, Clem. This actually was the reason that I got called in for the interview. Like, they were just like, you seemed pretty keen. We haven't had someone who both applied online and via post. I remember when I was going for the interview for this job, I told all my friends. Prior to that, I would tell no one because I was just so used to so many rejections. I was like, I'm not gonna jinx it by telling anyone that I've got an interview and then just end up not getting the job. So this particular instance, whoever I was talking to at the time was like, oh, what are you up to tomorrow? I'd be like, oh, I'm going for an interview. So I told everyone that I was going for an interview because I had told myself that I would kill it at this interview. And that's what I did. When I tell you, I knew all there was to know about this company. I knew their website in and out. I knew their values. I knew their mission. I could recite it to you as if I'm the one who wrote it. I did my homework. And so when I went in there, do you know the first question they asked me was, what do you think we do here? And I was just like, well. Like I went on, like I think I was rapping in my head. I think that's how fast I was talking because it was so fresh. It was so fresh in my mind. I couldn't believe that that's the first question they asked me. And I was just like, are you even going to try and make this hard for me or what? Anyway, I ended up killing the interview. I don't think I had ever interviewed that well ever before. One, because I was very prepared, and two, because I went in the room having the mentality that I will leave everything I have in that room. And so that's what I did. And I ended up getting the job. I attribute getting that job to being proactive and thinking outside the box. Just because you don't have the means, so for example, if you don't have the means to print a resume, get someone else to print it for you. I think for Africans or for Black people in Australia, once you're in the room and you're face to face with the interviewer or interviewers, they can see this is someone who we can actually give a try, right? And I think the other thing that is so overlooked is an employer wants to know that they can vibe with you once you start working. They want to know that they can actually relate to you. That's why I said in my previous video that the preconceived prejudices against Black people or against people who look different from you, eliminate that opportunity for you to hire someone who looks nothing like you or sounds nothing like you because you've already prejudged them in your mind, okay? So I got in that room, I had excellent conversations with the interviewers. We were laughing, we were talking, like it was just, I left that interview room extremely happy with how I'd done. I had no indication of whether I was going to get the job or not, but I was very happy with how I had interviewed because I was extremely prepared, but I was also extremely myself. For the first time, I think ever, I wasn't like reserved, I wasn't shy. And so when I went in that room, I was just like, listen, I need this job. I know I can do good at this job. You just need to give me a chance. Like that's the mentality I had. And sure enough, I got the job. When you do get the job, be willing to put in work. I thoroughly enjoyed the field of employment law. I had never sought out to be in employment law. I actually didn't even take that subject in law school. The subject was an elective. It was called law of work. And it sounded so boring to me. And I was like, law of work? Who would actually study law of work? That sounds so boring. Next. And I didn't study it in law school. Come, years later, when I started practicing it, I was like, I love this stuff. It was so interesting. Be willing to put in the work required. So the legislation, the main legislation for work in Australia is called the Fair Work Act. I read that act like it was my Bible. Hallelujah. Even before I had really meaty cases or cases that required my knowledge of the act, I read that act like no one's business because I was just like, I need to know what I'm doing. Because remember, this was my first full-time job. I'm no longer dealing with case studies like in law school. I'm dealing with real people and real issues. And that was scary. And I did not want to mess up. And so I made sure that I was on top of my game. And when I didn't know something, I would ask colleagues who'd been through it before. And that's how we got each other through. The other thing is, don't be scared to say when you don't know something. I think this is an African thing, right? Africans have a thing of not saying when we don't know something. I don't know why. I learned very quickly that there's a lot of power in saying, hey, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do in this instance. Can you help me? And once you show me once, that's it. You don't need to show me again. I will get it, but I actually don't know how to get there. So once you get in your first job, don't be afraid to say that you don't know, okay? Another thing as an African looking for work in an environment where you're the minority is considering cultural differences. Now, in Australia, people look at you in the eye when they're talking to you, right? In Kenya and in most African countries, looking someone in the eye, especially someone older than you, something that is not really practiced. It's considered rude, or it's considered too forward. And so you find a lot of Africans extremely shy or are extremely hesitant to make eye contact. Now in Australia, it's the opposite. Not making eye contact is rude. And so you want to be able to make eye contact with the person that you're speaking with. So because that's what helps them to connect with you. So consider cultural differences when you're looking for work and when you're face to face with decision makers, because like they say, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. You want to kill it the first time they meet you so that you're in their mind the next time. One thing that I found very useful was being my normal playful self on paper. So I'd have my resume with all my skills and my education and that stuff, and then I'd have my cover letter, which was more personal. I made my cover letter as playful as I am in real life. Like, I didn't want my cover letter to be as boring and as drab as a resume is, because a resume literally just lists your skills and anyone can do that. Almost everyone has a list of, education, skills, that sort of stuff. But if you don't have experience, you're entering the workforce for the first time, you're different because you look different, you sound different, your name is different. What's gonna set you apart from every other paper application that this person has received, that this decision maker has received? I was very much myself in how I wrote it. It was a 1-page long cover letter. I made light jokes. Like I would put in there stuff like, I really want to see a day when the word U-turn can be used in its full capacity, because in Australia, U-turn is usually referred to as UE, because Australians like to shorten words. And so I would make a joke about something like that. A lot of the times when I went into an interview, that would be a point of conversation. They'd just be like, oh my God, I never thought about the fact that Australians shorten words so much. Do you know what I mean? So look at that, and everyone has that thing that is unique within themselves and that they can bring to a workplace or to a job interview to just put you above the rest, right? And even if you don't get that job, you will be on that person's mind. You'll probably consider you for a future opportunity or a different opportunity. That's the other thing that I learned very quickly once I started my career, is that it didn't serve me to try and be like anybody else. So my first job, I was really in need of mentorship. I was really in need of support. And my boss at the time was just talking to a wall was more productive. Let's just put it that way. There was just no support. I found myself getting very frustrated because I wasn't learning, I wasn't progressing, and I had a desire to grow. I didn't want to be stagnant. I didn't want to be complacent. I'm the type of person who, if I'm not growing, I feel like I'm dying. So I very quickly realized I needed a change. And so that's what led me to even apply for my next job, which had me move to Melbourne, which is my most recent job, and the one that I enjoyed the most. This brings me to my next point, which is you need a good mentor. If you're starting out in a particular field, look for people who've done what you want to do. And if their assistance is not forthcoming, ask them, tell them, hey, I need you to help me move forward. I need you to help me advance. That's really how I ended up growing in my second full-time job, because I had an incredibly amazing mentor. Now, my mentor was the type of person who never looked at me like I was different from anyone else. He never treated me like I was this African and how do you know English and can you really do this? He never treated me like I was different from anyone else. And once I told him my goal, I said, my goal is to grow. I do not want to be stagnant in my job. I don't want to just be complacent doing the same thing every day. I'm not the type of person who can be satisfied in a role doing that. And he was just like, challenge accepted. Anytime there was a seminar that could help me, a book that could help me, like if I was struggling with some area of the law, like I didn't understand a concept, he would actually get, an excerpt from a book or send me a book and stuff like that. And my mentor, who was my boss, lived and worked in a different state than I did. And he still had an incredible impact on me professionally because he was really good at picking up on people's individual skills and finding ways to highlight those individual skills for the benefit of the team as a whole or the organization as a whole, because we're a national organization. I can't tell you how much it meant for me to have a mentor who was a white male, which is the most privileged individual on the universe. And to have someone in that position of power decide, you know what? I can see the potential here. I can see the desire for growth. I can see the hunger, and I will develop that. I can't tell you what that did. That was the difference. That made an entire world of difference in my life, because it was the first time that someone was saying to me, I see you. It was the first time that someone who didn't look like me was just like, I hear you and I want you to succeed. And there was no ego, there was never any negativity, and I thrived. When I tell you I would work weekends, I wasn't getting paid to work weekends, but I would work weekends just because I had that much drive for work, because of the amount of belief that was instilled in me by someone in a position of power. And the important thing is to realize that your attitude when you're doing the small jobs will inform the kind of ethics you have when you have the big jobs or when you make it. Because I adopted the attitude that I always wanted to learn and I always wanted to do better than I did before. And whatever it was that would get me there, I was ready and willing to do it, right? So I read all the books I could get my hands on in terms of employment law. I read a lot of legal articles. I read case law after case law after case law to sharpen my mind, and bouncing off ideas with my colleagues, with my boss, and just getting that supportive environment. Oh my God, it meant the world to me. So as an African person, look for someone who has been through the career you want to pursue and learn from them. That's the best way to learn, because if you're like me, you learn best by doing, not by being told. So I thrive by being thrown in the deep end. That's how I thrive in terms of kicking goals and in terms of being the best at what I do. It's tried and tested. It's the best way for me to get the best results. I don't like being micromanaged. I don't like being handheld through a learning process. I like to figure it out by myself, because when I figure it out by myself, I can apply it in my own way. I don't, rather than having to copy paste what someone else has done. And that's another thing, right? Is that the mentor that I had really created a space for me to be entirely myself in the workplace. Now, I cannot tell you how important it was for me to be able to have space where I can laugh, my loud laugh, and not think twice about it. Because, you know, my laugh has been pretty loud since I was born. It's something that I can't really do anything about. Like, there's no volume button. It's just the way things are. So, it's gotten me in trouble, like in primary school, like, you know, teachers would come and be like, yeah, we know it was you because we heard you from across the school. I was able to be myself in the workplace, like, you know, be slightly playful, but also be very serious when it was time to be serious, and just be able to just laugh, be able to just let go and not worry that I was being judged, that I was being considered to be too much, and that sort of thing. That kind of freedom is priceless. It's priceless. I can only wish that I pay it forward. So that's the other thing I will say. Once you get to a position where you have decision-making power, you've made it, please pay it forward. Make sure you mentor people who come after you. Give people an opportunity to shadow you in your job. When I was working, I allowed law students to come and observe my cases in court. I took part in mentorship programs through INCUBATE Foundation. It's a foundation in Australia that provides mentorship opportunities and connects African Australians to, you know, mentors and opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. And I'll leave their information in the description box below. Yeah, I volunteered for such opportunities because I was just like, this would have been priceless to me when I was a student. To see someone like me mentoring me, you couldn't have stopped me. So when you finally get to a position where you have made it, or you have succeeded, or you've climbed up the ranks, please pay it forward. Please open doors for other people like you to be able to succeed in your field. Finally, do not give up. I promise you, it is worth it when you get to the other side. I know you've probably gotten a lot of no's. You probably don't know where to start, but beyond all those no's is a massive yes that will make all the difference. But to get to that yes, you have to keep going. So don't give up. Don't give up despite how many times you're told no, despite how many resumes you send without a response. Please don't give up, because I can promise you it is so worth it. It is so worth it to get to the other side and just be like, okay, I persisted, now I'm here, now I can actually make a difference. So that's my 2 cents on career and how to make it in Australia. Oi, and throw your shyness out the window. You have to assert yourself. You have to make yourself heard and seen. You are important. What you have to say is important. And don't let anything or any other experience that you've been through negate that fact. Let's prosper. In the comments below, using the hashtag #MadvocateMondays, let me know what your takeaway is from this episode. Let me know if you're struggling career-wise, if there's something that you're going through in your career, if you've just started out, if you're in the workplace already and you're just struggling to navigate a certain thing. Let's start a discussion below. And here's wishing you every success in everything that you do, and I'll see you next time.